Alright, so while I'm not the biggest fan of that criticism, all style, no substance, I think it's pretty clear that that's going to be a topic of conversation throughout this, talking about these two. Um, and when you look at these two movies, I remember vividly when the '99 Thomas Crown Affair came out because it was the same year as The World Is Not Enough, and I was still at that phase where we were just getting into Bond, so it was like I was almost kind of mistaking the two for each other because they looked quite similar from a distance, and I didn't realize for a while that it was a remake of a Steve McQueen movie that is quite similar in a lot of ways, but they also have their differences. But this is one of those cases where you talk about remakes and how necessary or unnecessary they might be. But there are those rare instances where you think that there is a movie that's maybe in need of being remade. Like there was something there that kind of had potential, but it didn't really quite do much with, and it's like it's something that probably could benefit from that. And I think it probably could be argued that McQueen's movie from 1968 would be one of those where it's like when you hear that this is a movie that's being remade, your thought might be at the time, oh, there was a lot you could probably expound on, a lot you could probably improve. So that seems like a good idea. Like that's something that's actually, ripe to be remade, and especially in the fashionable way the McTiernan movie was kind of going for. But let's, I guess we can kind of talk about the approaches they took to what is essentially the same story. I guess we can start with our two leads, Brosnan and McQueen. And the thing about it is, you kind of think, 90s Pierce Brosnan, late 90s Pierce Brosnan, like right in mid-Bond, Brosnan taking over a Steve McQueen part sounds pretty perfect on paper. And it's, as far as like having to remake this movie at this particular time, I would say Brosnan is the absolute best choice that you probably could have gone for. Like, it almost seems like it just sort of, like the stars align in this way that was perfect for him to take over this part and maybe do something a little more with it, because while McQueen certainly was known for his presence, that's pretty much all he had. He didn't quite have the as well-rounded of a talent as other people of his generation, but that presence went a really long way, and it's abundantly clear how he became as iconic as he did. But with that said, as far as him having other abilities as an actor apart from his presence to an extent, it was all, the presence seems to be all that was asked for of this part. Like, it was all just kind of come to this and just kind of be McQueen without really doing much of anything else. Seemed to be what his direction was for most of it. There's one early scene where it does seem like we kind of intentionally subvert the McQueen image just a little bit, where he's kind of known for that sort of, stoic, unbreakable image and just that whole feeling. And so we have this whole opening where he hires the four different guys to go at, the four different times to commit this robbery, that all benefits and comes back to him. And while he does that kind of shrouded in the shadows and like blinding him with lights and stuff like that, he still kind of got that vibe. Even we haven't really gotten much of a good look at him yet, because they don't get a good look at him. And when all of this is over and the plan has completely come to fruition and the money has been taken and everything has gone according to plan, we get him almost sort of like he sort of drops a mask of sorts, and when he's like alone in a room completely by himself with nobody else around, he starts to bask in the fact that the plan went through as planned and starts to like cackle almost in like a super villainy kind of way, and kind of sort of breaking that sort of stoic image that he kind of sets up, and not just in his whole career but throughout this robbery also, and the whole setup to it. And that's about the most interesting thing he gets to do here. Because obviously he does get to have the romantic scenes with Faye Dunaway, but we'll talk about that. But as far as Brosnan goes, It is like it's not necessarily just that The World Is Not Enough came out the same year and he was right in the middle of his Bond lineup, but just kind of the start of it when they've now brought Faye Dunaway back to play his psychiatrist. I guess I don't really know what these scenes have to do with anything else, apart from to give us some sort of, I don't even know because it's not even really a wraparound kind of thing, but they set him up to be like the really slick type, and she's asking him about women, and he said his response is, "I enjoy women, yes," and he's just doing it in a very like sort of like Bond, just sort of upping the sleaze factor just a little more, just not much, but just a little more, and that's what it kind of feels like this character is right from the start. But he does have to bring that certain charm where there's almost this sort of ambiguity about him where when it's revealed that he may or may not be seeing this other woman and then it could be multiple women for all Rene Russo knows, and that whole thing of is he, obviously he's a criminal no matter what, but is she able to find him trustworthy, and how far is that going to go, and that sort of mystery surrounding him in regards to like who he is outside of the slick criminal, is something that he brings that really works here. But much like McQueen's problem, it's kind of hard to find something that sort of breaks through and finds anything else other than that underneath. Where it's not really depth that they seem to be going for. It's very much the style both of these are going for, especially the original movie when you have and it's I'm actually surprised that the remake didn't really call back to this at all. The whole use of the split screen thing throughout the original movie, which I'm sure in 1968 might have seemed sort of innovative or something, or like and just creative in this way, or kind of tried to help along the whole thing of everything feels really put together, the way his crimes are committed, how they kind of break off into pieces and then come back together, something like that. But it mostly just kind of feels like trying to be stylish for the sake of being stylish, and it doesn't really add much of an effect at all. There's a movie with Elliot Page called The Tracy Fragments, where the concept of that movie is that the whole movie is like that, the split screen with the different things happening like all at once. Like that's literally the entire movie, and that movie is a fucking headache. Is as admirable as it is, but the ambition, it's yeah, and honestly, it becomes this sort of tiresome headache when it's just portions of this movie, not even the whole thing. Especially like it'd be one thing if it felt like there was something there, like artistically, I guess you could say. But it really does just kind of feel like it's for the sake of being flashy and seeming exciting, because the plan is kind of mundane. Like it's like that. Like it sounds more complicated than it is, and it sounds more, slick and exciting than it actually is. But it's like we have introductions to characters like Yaphet Kotto's in there as one of them, and there's some tension with these characters as it goes on, like individually, but as far as it like coming together as one full plan, it feels pretty anticlimactic, because at first you're kind of like, oh, what's happening exactly, and how is this coming together? And then once you realize what's happening, the excitement's not really there anymore. It's just like, oh, I get it, and that's the payoff. Just you say, oh, okay, I get it now, and there's there's that. And as far as how the remake handled that, where they did definitely add something here, kind of to the style, where with the original we just kind of had banks and stuff like that, like very very traditional robberies. The remake is set in the art world, which does give it this, and I could see there being like an air of pretension, but I can also kind of see there being like, as far as the air pretension, that being intentional potentially because of the way just the characters are, the way this particular embodiment of Crown is, and how he really fits into this world. But it does almost add this sort of like elegance to it of sorts that's not really there when you're just talking about just an average bank robbery or whatever. So it does, you can tell it's sort of amping up the style rather than seeing where the faults were in the original movie and kind of amplifying them, but they still kind of find a way to switch things up a little bit, just a little bit, when we get to our insurance investigator character. Where there's two different names going on, but they're the same character. The Faye Dunaway character in the original and the Rene Russo one here. Um, and when we see Faye Dunaway in this, much like McQueen, there's not really a whole lot that has to be done because she, as far as her being an investigator, in both movies have the same setup where she basically figures out that it's him immediately. Like she just immediately singles him out. There's really no investigation aspect to it. It's really just she just kind of assumes that it's him and then they follow him around until they figure out what's going on, or she figures out what's going on. And I've always wondered what exactly that was supposed to convey because it's like yeah, it gets the story moving because then it ends up being the whole thing of him sort of knowing they both know where each other is coming from and that's underlying throughout their romance kind of thing. But I get stuck on this because it's like, is it supposed to show that she's like really just that good? Like she can just look at him and say like oh yeah it's definitely him, or maybe it's like supposed to show off some connection that they have even though they haven't met personally at this particular moment. But it's really like both movies are really trying to set up how slick and cool he is. Now he can get away with anything, and he has gotten away with everything. He literally has everything at his disposal. But I mean, if she can just look at a picture of him and know he must really fucking suck at this. So that just seems quite contradictory because they don't really do a lot of setup to say like, oh, she's just that good. We get a little bit more of that in the Russo version of the character because we do have it seems really out of place though because it's that setup where they've got the guy in the interrogation room and she comes in and she like almost breaks his neck or something. Like they're trying to make it seem like she's significantly tougher than she once was back when she was Faye Dunaway. um, but even that feels like really not just really forced, but when you just look at the character throughout the entire rest of the movie, it sticks out in a weird way. Like they were taking the character in another direction, but then ultimately just didn't. Like they saw how sort of vacant the Faye Dunaway character was, and it's like, oh, we can make her tougher, we can give her more to do. But they really don't. It's just really kind of that one scene promises that, and then it never really quite delivers on it, and then it just goes into the romance angle, and that's the thing that I guess we can talk about uh, as far as the romance goes, where both these movies do fall into the same trap. Where I was talking about it's interesting that there's a romance between them because, like I said, there could be that underlying factor. Like, there's going to be some sort of thing here where they have a lot of chemistry and, like, there's a real fire between them whenever they're together. But there's that underlying thing where they both know who the other is, and it's like, who's using who to get to their own goal. But you don't that that underlying factor is there only because we know the story up to this point. But neither movie really acts on that. And it basically they both fall into that same trap of basically just deciding to switch genres for a long time. Like they go from being these sort of crime movies that are in like this sort of caper kind of thing, like an old fashioned kind of thing. Um, well, you would say old fashioned for the remake. Obviously, with the original, that would just be the fashion, I guess. But yeah, they don't really like cash in on that. They don't use that to their advantage and really build that up and really add something to the characters that would honestly make their chemistry significantly greater, knowing that they're coming from different places and trying to get different things out of each other. They both just kind of decide they're going to be romance movies. And it almost feels like everything else is dropped for long periods of time just to focus on this. Especially with the obviously Dunaway has the chess scene, that they both do quite well. And there's a lot of there's more chemistry in this one chess scene in the original than there is between Brosnan and Russo at all, in my opinion, anyway. Because like when you watch the chess scene and you see first off, just this was fresh off Bonnie and Clyde. It was like the next year, and this and Bonnie and Clyde together immediately proved that 1960s Faye Dunaway was like, holy fuck. So this whole chess scene is like is more steamy than any of the multiple sex scenes in the remake, I think. Like, I get where it's like it's cool, especially at a time like this when you had like, you know, romances that seemed kind of shoehorned into movies, even though it's a significant plot here. But you had those, you know, sex scenes that seemed really gratuitous, but especially gratuitous because they didn't really go for it. It was just like they would kiss and then a dissolve and then they're in bed. And it's like with this, we do actually get, you know, the whole thing. And it's like there's 3 different scenes or so where it's like, let's just see how many different ways we can shoot Rene Russo's naked body. Not that that's a complaint at all, but it's as far as that goes. But it just doesn't really feel like we're seeing it, you know, head on, and yet even so, there's still nothing there. It just kind of feels like we're getting into softcore territory for a little bit, and just as soulless. So, and like I said, just the chess scene by itself has everything that all these scenes are trying to accomplish. And that's all it is we just really see them playing chess. But the way that it's shot and the way they, like, sort of look at each other, there's definitely more there, I think. So, if there's one thing that the original, I think, accomplished just a little more, even though both of them are really lacking, the chess scene really does something. So, there is that. As far as, like, evoking something out of the audience. But, I do think that the original has something in its favor that the remake doesn't, which is it's really, really fast-paced. Like, you can say what you will about the original and how it feels very directionless a lot of the time, and like there's only so much that the 2 actors can do with these very vague parts, but it's about an hour 42, I think, and that goes by really fast. So they've got something there from a pacing standpoint. Like I said, I feel like the remake's just trying to do kind of one too many things and open one too many doors, because another thing that both these movies are really missing that can honestly be something very crucial that brings movies like this to life in other ways is there's no real supporting characters, or no supporting characters that really make a difference or matter. The closest thing we get to it in the remake is Dennis Leary, and we get that one scene where he, like, opens up after it gets to that point when she thinks he's with some other girl, and it's like, you know, she's suddenly she's supposed to be so hardened, and now she's heartbroken because that's the way that character works. That character type works every time. And so Leary, like, starts to open up to her, and he talks about, like, when he went through, like, a really, really rough patch. And that's it. And he's there to console her, like, maybe one more time. But overall, there's just really nothing there when it feels like there really should be. And Leary could have done wonders with a part like this if it had been meatier. But most of the time, it just feels like he's just there. Like, it's like a waste to even hire him when the character doesn't have that much meat to him. And I can't even really tell you a supporting character in the original movie. It's just like the 2 of them. Or, like I said, there'll be a familiar face like Yaphet Kotto might come in. Or Gordon Pencett's in it, but that's it. Like, they're in there, yeah, and you'll see their faces and know them. That's it, really. There's nothing that stands out about them. They don't really get to do anything, apart from, like, the one task they're given. They don't get any chance to stand out whatsoever, and that's, like... And in this one, the remake, we've got, like, Ben Gazzara as his lawyer, and there's that scene where, you know, Leary and the cops come in the house, and he's like, you know, we'll talk about ask your lawyer what we're doing here. And Ben Gazzara just walks out in an apron, and it's like, hey, and it's like this big, you know, in-your-face Leary kind of moment.
and it kind of makes you feel like that character should have been meatier and had more to him, but not no. It's like even being Ben Gazzara, a very recognizable face, just nothing. And then Mark Margolis made the opening credits, and he's in it for like 10 seconds, and it's like, ooh, this could be an interesting character, and it's like, oh, he's kind of like there's something in common here, like he's a thread in here, like he's gonna get us from one thing to the other, and like just as you even register that he's in the movie, he's gone. He was just here to provide us with like one piece of information, and then he's gone. And it's like, at least to give him a little monologue or something. I mean, let the actors do their thing, but they get so focused on the two main characters and then doing that thing. It's just like that thing being trying to find the chemistry somewhere, and this one's really, really trying. Like, you get the sense watching it that you're supposed to just be really wrapped up in the chemistry and the whole, just the two of them are just electric together, but it's like you can see it working so hard for that, and it's just really not there at all. Even when, he has those Brosnan deliveries of, do you want to dance or do you want to dance and stuff like that. Like, those should really have some sort of fire to them, and they just really don't. Like, there's no... Like, these two movies working together just have a hard time finding that chemistry, and I think the thing that hurts that is the story itself, where it doesn't seem to want to use any of its underlying factors of where the characters are coming from or who they really are. It just switches genres and just sort of stays that, and you kind of have to wait for the story to come back around, and it goes on for so long you kind of wonder if the story even is going to come back around, if there even is going to be another crime committed or not, or if one of them is going to catch the other off guard, or one of them is going to outsmart the other. And it's just not there. They just become love stories. They just surrender to the genre of romance. And obviously I commend the original much more for its downer ending where they don't end up together. The fact that when she gets on the plane and he's there, that's literally the end of a fucking romantic comedy. And I get it that this movie does take like a lighter like the Bill Conti score is obviously very light throughout, and it does have like that sort of bouncy feel to it altogether, despite being an R-rated crime movie when you really look at it. But there is something where you can tell they're like trying to have fun with it, and that's something that I can get behind, sure. But as far as the way, like I said, it's sort of it's a little too light. Like, it's like I appreciate them having a light tone, but that, like I said, it basically just turns into a romantic comedy by the end. Is it lost its way. So, um, surely to God, there is a good movie in this story somewhere. And like I said, where this one kind of gets wrapped up in itself trying to be cool and slick and stuff like that, and get one past the audience and stuff like that. Um, the original does have some stuff going for it as far as just sort of watch. I mean, I do understand also that it could be there may not be much entertainment in watching this dude who gets away with everything, and it is already rich but just gets more rich just basically because he's bored, I guess. Just do his rich person things like fly around, like where they make the remake uses the flying scene as another sort of romantic gesture. I actually kind of prefer it in this one, when it's the Oscar-winning song, and he's just flying around by himself, and it's like the way the camera moves, the way the camera's like flying alongside him, and we're flying over these fields and stuff like that also. There's something to that scene that I just kind of like individually, even though it has nothing to do with anything except to say, hey, this is how rich this guy is. This is I mean, I guess you could say, like, this is how empty his life is. Like, he literally has everything. But yeah, just sort of, this is, where he's kind of in his happy place, just kind of being alone in the sky. And there's something to that, and that it kind of adds to that as far as his character, that the ending is that, literally the ending is him flying away by himself again, and leaving her behind. And it's maybe that's just the cynic in me that prefers that ending over the, getting back together on the plane thing. But yeah, so I guess what I'm saying is I wish these crime movies were more of crime movies. but but no, they're like they set themselves up as crime movies, and I feel like they feel like they're crime movies. Like, Norman Jewison, fresh off of Best Picture winner in the Heat of the Night the very previous year, and McTiernan, who's done action movies like Die Hard and Last Action Hero and Predator, was doing something a little different here and a little out of his usual place here. But it's I don't know, like it feels much more like the score, or like it's trying to do something like the score of the Frank Oz movie that came a couple years after this with De Niro and Edward Norton. But that movie was like a crime movie. Like you had the whole Angela Bassett thing with De Niro, but that was just a small thing because that's all it needed to be. But here it's like I said, you've got something here because of who she is as a character and the fact that she's investigating him. But the fact that she basically just decides to embrace that he's a criminal, he decides to just sort of let it fly while they're together. It's like, oh yeah, well she knows I'm a criminal, so we're just going to talk openly about the fact that I'm a criminal now. Is never really convincing and just kind of feels like, oh, I guess we've reached this point now, because there's, like I said, with the absence of chemistry, there's no real progression in how they are together and what it is they open up about. So, yeah. So that's pretty much. I guess I'm just going to abruptly end this here by saying that while I do think they both have their advantages against each other, I think I'm probably more likely to rewatch the original just because it's I guess I feel like it accomplishes more the goal of being as stylish as it is, even if the whole problem is that that's basically all its focus ended up being on was how stylish it could be, with story and character just going completely out the window basically. But I do like the changes that the remake did, and that we were headed in the right direction of sort of taking this, very paper thin movie and trying to build on a little more and make it a little more like I said, add the elegance of the art world to it, and trying to add a little more to the insurance investigator, but it's still falling short. If we just sort of, I don't know how many times this movie would have to be remade until it finally landed on something that's gonna work. But I feel like the remake just kind of fell into too many of the traps that the first one had already established. But we got a little further. So there's that. But like I said, even so, I'm probably more prone to revisiting the original over this one, and this because it does feel like they're trying too hard in their own different ways. Like this one's trying too hard with the split screen and stuff like that, and this one's trying too hard with really trying to play up the chemistry that isn't there. And it's like we're almost supposed to just sort of blindly follow this movie, and it's like, oh, they're dancing. That's what people do when they have chemistry. So they must have chemistry. So, but it's not there. It's not. There's just nothing there between you and the screen at all, except air. So that's pretty much where I land with these. So sorry if that's unsatisfying, but that's where we are. So the next thing, we're going to go into a couple of black comedies that were coincidentally suggested recently, but I was already doing it anyway, so that lined up well. And then we'll go into Venom and the other new releases, and then a bunch of horror stuff and all that. And we'll continue the Tremors thing as well. So until the next thing, I think that's it.